We're live, Max.
If I can do it, what's your excuse? What's holding you back or what's stopping you? Go on and do it. What's there to lose? If I can do it, what's your excuse? Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I want to welcome you to another episode of What's Your Excuse. I am your host, the blind blogger Maxwell Ivy, and you can find the podcast at theblindblogger.net. If you want to find out more about the services I'm offering these days in the area of accessibility and inclusion, please check out the accessibilityadvantage.com. So I do appreciate y'all joining us. Today, I'm going to be speaking with a gentleman who has a very interesting story of the challenges that can come with standing up for ourselves and our ethics. His name is John Goey. He's a multiple award winning financial planner from Toronto, Canada. He is a certified financial planner and a certified investment manager. He's also the author of 3 books so far, all in finance. He's a passionate advocate for investors' rights and for putting the clients first. And you can find him at johndegooey.ca. That's .ca, not.com. So, John, welcome to What's Your Excuse? Thank you for joining me today.
Well, thank you for having me, Max. I'm glad to be here.
Well, it's. I think we're gonna have an interesting conversation, if not kind of different than any of the guests or stories I've had on before, but a very powerful one because it's the kind of thing that people live with in the course of their careers, pretty much regardless of whatever profession they may be involved in. So I think it would be good if people could hear how things were going, in the early days of your career. What were things like, and then what little you can speak about the dilemma you found yourself in, and the personal challenges and how you dealt with it.
Sure. So I have been working and giving advice to retail investors since 1993. I did graduate work where I realized I was sitting in on committee hearings at the House of Commons in Ottawa, and I realized in my work as a co-op student doing my master's that I was doing some research into credit card rates and those sorts of things that were consumer oriented. And it dawned on me that I was a bit of a consumer advocate, and it was not something that I wanted that I expected or that I went out looking for. It just sort of found me. When I began working in finance way back in September of 1993, we're now coming up on 32 years. Uh, um, I started thinking like an advocate, and I was doing what I could, which is what everyone says they do, which is to put their client interests first. But I found that the industry is largely amoral. It's not immoral, it's not evil. It is just an industry that works without a lot of thought being given to what is right or wrong, and the primary consideration is what is profitable. And so I found myself speaking with many of my peers around the water cooler over the years, talking about, well, this product will pay a bit more, or this product is the suppliers are taking us to the ball game on the weekend. Do you want to go? Well, maybe we should put some money into this product as opposed to some other product. And the sales element was causing me some consternation because we're supposed to be people that put our clients' interests first, and considerations of sales are supposed to be secondary. We're supposed to be looking for things that are best for them in all circumstances. And what I saw a lot of my peers being seduced by trinkets and trash and stories and trips and various things that most investors never see. So I became uncomfortable with that. It would be too strong to say I was disillusioned, because I think it's a great industry, and I think a lot of people who offer financial advice are good people who have good intentions, who do good work. But it is nonetheless an industry where otherwise good people can be compromised, where they can let their guard down, where they can be um, seduced by corporate interests, either by product suppliers or by the firm they work for, as opposed to looking out for the interests of the clients that they're supposed to be representing. So I'll use that as the backdrop before I tell my personal story, and I'll stop there, Max.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think what you're talking about is no different than the stories we hear of medical prescription and medical uh, uh, products
Yeah.
representatives providing these benefits to doctors and hospitals that the average person can't receive, or in the area of government lobbying, where quite often it isn't just the stuff, it's the information that these people would have access to that the average person wouldn't. And understanding that you do have a fiduciary responsibility, or you're supposed to your clients, I can understand how that was causing you some concern.
Yeah, that's exactly right. There are stories. A lot of people are familiar with the stories of having a pharmaceutical company with a hot young female sales rep that goes in to talk to the doctors and bats her eyes, and couldn't you maybe recommend to prescribe our drug as opposed to the other drug? Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. And there are a lot of these things where that's not supposed to be a factor at all. But the fact of the matter is, it is a factor. And I've seen some Netflix TV shows and other things to that effect. But I think it's fairly well understood and accepted these days that that's just the way the business works, and that's the way a lot of businesses work. And again, I don't want to say that I was so disillusioned as to be infuriated and mad at the world. I think I was maybe a little more sensitive to and mindful of the trials and tribulations, the traps that you can fall into, and I was determined not to fall into them.
Well, that speaks highly of your character, which is something that's a very valuable asset to somebody in the business that you're in.
Thank you. Yeah, I like to think so. Again, without pumping my chest too much, I like to think that I'm one of the good guys.
Right. Well, back in many years ago, my family operated a traveling carnival here in Texas, and more than once, people told my dad that he was too honest to be in that business, and he would usually just smile and thank them for it because he felt that was a good thing to be known for in a business where not too many people were known for it. So,
Yeah, I agree, and I think there are very few things in life that are more precious than your personal reputation and your personal integrity, and I think it's important that people be able to live with what their conscience will allow. And I guess what I'm saying is that maybe I draw the line at a spot that is different from where other people draw the line, but nonetheless, there was a line that I wasn't prepared to cross.
right. And now, at some point, not being willing to cross this line that many other people in your industry were willing to step over caused you some personal pain, I believe.
Yeah, so maybe I can tell my story at this point, Max, because it's a story that has actually recurred on a couple of occasions. But most notably for me, I'd like to bring you back to 2017, 2018. I was at a firm that is, to use the terminology of the financial services industry, vertically integrated, which means that they both manufacture investment products and distribute them. So here's a product that we manufacture that you can buy. Oh, and here we give you advice as to what products you can buy. And obviously, whenever that's the case, whenever you can recommend, imagine a person who is works for the Ford Motor Company and he recommends Ford cars, but he can also recommend General Motors cars and Volkswagens and Hondas. Uh, you may know that it's great that he can offer other cars, but if he says, but this Ford car here, it's a really, really great deal. As soon as there is an opportunity to talk about your company's products and to recommend them above other products, there's an obvious question as to the whether or not that product is being recommended because it is truly the best, or if it's going to be because there's going to be some money being paid. At any rate, I'm at this company that has people that sell just mutual funds and people that have security licenses. So in Canada, you have separate licenses for just mutual funds or the full gamut of investing. So this is a firm that had advisors in both camps that manufactured some actively managed mutual funds, and that was obviously in the business of making money on both the manufacturing side. Here's some products for you to invest, and the distribution side. Let us give you some advice on what to do. I was writing. I've been writing. I've written, as you mentioned, 3 books. I've probably written a couple hundred articles in the national press, and I was writing for a national newspaper at the time. And I was writing articles saying that high cost, actively managed embedded compensation mutual funds were not necessarily best for investors. And since the firm I was representing manufactured high cost, actively managed embedded compensation mutual funds, they didn't exactly like me. Even as the firm insisted they were independent, that its representatives were independent. So my magazine is looking at me for my regular contributions, and I would write the article, and my compliance department had to approve whatever articles I wrote. So I wrote articles that were totally fine, and my compliance people would not approve it. And so now I'm in a situation where I'm fulfilling my obligations to my publisher, writing the articles, and I'm submitting them, which is my obligation through securities law, because I can't say anything without having my company look at it. And they were engaging in de facto censorship. They were just saying, well, you can't say that. And I would say, well, why not? And they would just say, well, it makes the industry look bad. It's like, well, it's the truth. Here's the evidence. And I would actually show research papers and studies and peer-reviewed articles written by Nobel Prize winners and whatnot that, this is, I'm not, it's like 2 + 2 = 4. I'm not saying anything that is particularly controversial. It's just that people didn't want to hear it. So I wrote another article, not approved, another article, not approved. I got to the point where I had written 6 articles that were all rejected by my employer. And I actually went to 2 different firms that were also said that they were independent. And I asked them about these articles, and they said, these are fine. There's absolutely nothing that you have to change at all. These are completely compliant articles. You don't even have to change a comma. They're perfectly fine. But my firm, the firm that I was working with, ended up rejecting all 6 of them. So in the end, they decided that the way to deal with me was to simply terminate my employment for no cause. And so we're in a situation where I'm the one who had to go to switch firms because my firm couldn't uphold its side of the bargain with regard to ethics. And I'll say one last thing, Max, and that is that in the financial services industry, it's not like where there's a dispute between a plaintiff and someone else in a court of law where you can go to a court to have it resolved. In the securities industry, it is up to the firm and the firm alone to interpret and enforce the industry's rules. And if a registrant, an individual advisor, disagrees, he or she can complain to the firm all he or she wants. At the end of the day, the firm has the hammer and will decide how the rule will be enforced and how it will be interpreted. And you have to comply. And if you ever do anything inappropriate, such as get the article published without getting the firm's approval, that's cause for dismissal. So I really had no recourse. I basically had to do as I was told, or just keep on writing articles that were never going to be approved until the magazine said, well, John, we can't keep you as a contributor because you're not contributing anything. Not because I wasn't writing it, but because I wasn't getting it approved. So in the end, I stood my ground and I switched firms, and I had to lose clients because whenever you switch from one firm to another, there's always going to be a few clients that for whatever reason don't come with you. And even if they all come with you, when you switch from one firm to another, it often takes 2 or 3 months for all your clients to move from one firm to the other. And for those 2 or 3 months, you're not getting paid because you don't have clients because you're at one firm, the firm that you've gone to, and your clients are still at the firm that you've left. So, I have some personal scars and some financial consequences as a result of standing my ground.
Right. I imagine that was also a little bit of concern because you basically got terminated in an industry where they don't have to give cause for termination. I would imagine that it's not a good thing to be going from one job to have to find another job, and people have to wonder, well, why is it that he's no longer working where he was and where he's been for several years?
I suppose that's true. I never had trouble finding work because I'm lucky enough, Max, that because I write books and write articles and I have a bit of a profile here in Canada, I'm not a household name or anything, but within the financial services industry, people know who I am and they know that I'm a straight shooter. And as a result, I had no trouble finding reputable firms that would be quite happy to have me join them. So it was not a concern. If anything, it enhanced my personal reputation as a person of integrity, but it did cost me financially in terms of a few clients leaving and also the transition period and moving from one firm to the other. That was the real cost. I don't think there was any real cost to my reputation as a human being.
Right. So, what were some of the things you did during this time to keep yourself healthy, to keep this from affecting you more than it did? Because I'm hearing some frustration and some disappointment. You mentioned you didn't have outright disillusionment, but I would imagine that this was not a good time for you personally to see what was going on in your industry, and then to have have to choose between your values and an income.
Yeah, well, the decision was made for me, so I didn't really, there was no real choice. It was foisted upon me. What's the story? When life hands you a lemon, you have to make lemonade. So I was handed this lemon, and I got to tell you, Max, my conscience has always been clear. I'm 62 years old, and I've never looked back on my life with regrets about you did things that were inappropriate. My conscience is very clear that I've always done what I felt was right. That doesn't mean it was right, but my conscience is clear that my intentions were good and that everything was fine. In terms of how I coped, I think people who have a strong moral compass have no real trouble in keeping their own counsel and in staying grounded and in soldiering on because they know that this too will pass. My reputation is worth way more to me than a few $100,000 of lost income, and I guard that very very jealously, and I moved on. And the thing is, you also don't want to be miserable coming into work every day. And if you're going to go to work and your employer is just going to be jerking your chain and giving you a hard time, at some point you probably have to move on at any rate. Unfortunately, in my industry, moving on means foregoing revenue and losing some clients as you go from one firm to the other, because that is the only meaningful recourse. If your employer is not going to allow you to say things that are completely legal and appropriate because of corporate interests that they don't want to see compromised because it's going to affect their profit margin, uh, there's not a lot you can do. And so at that point, the realistic option is to just move on.
Right. So, um, how do you feel you came by this resolve that's been part of your career? Are there experiences you've had or things you can point to for other people who may be in the early parts of their career or during their education process that you see as strengthening your resolve?
Um, I don't know that I can give advice that's general. I'll tell you what I've been doing personally, what works for me, and then you can take from it what you will. I'm so I'll begin by saying I'm not particularly religious. So if that works for you, great. It doesn't work for me. I do, however, meditate, and I would say, spiritual, not in a religious way, but in a sort of cosmic, what's your role in the universe kind of way. And I see my role, my purpose in life as being one that helps investors understand how the industry works and who plays a role in getting the industry to affect meaningful change that is more consumer centric. But I have no delusions about this being an easy path. This is going to be a challenge. It has been a challenge throughout my career. I've been hard at it now for 32 years. I expect I'll be at it for a few years longer. And this is a worthy fight that I will continue to engage in. And there's an old saying that the purpose of life is a life of purpose. And fighting for what I believe is right gets me up in the morning, and it gives me purpose in life. And I'm lucky that I've got a wonderfully supportive spouse. I've got a supportive family and network of friends, and I'm comfortable in my own skin. And so I don't mind fighting the fight. And if that means I leave a few dollars on the table here or there, so be it. My conscience is clear.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying you have built up a strong community and you have taken the time to really discover who you are and what your purpose is. And by being super focused in on those things, it allowed you to have resolve during times when the easier way would have been just to do it the way everybody else was doing it.
I think that's a good summary. I don't I don't consciously think of it as easy or hard. I think of it as being right or wrong. And if you do what is right, then I always think it's easier to do what's right.
Right. And you mentioned, your goal is to educate people, and I thought it was interesting how you referred to the books that you've written so far. I think the expression was to emphasize rationality and in, even when optimism would be more fun. I think that was the line that stuck with me. So I
Yeah,
want to, would you mention one or two of your books
sure.
and kind of, I would imagine writing the way you approach this subject is probably still not making you some friends in some parts of the industry, though.
That's right. Very few people have a neutral opinion of me. People either love me or hate me in the industry. And when I started, because I wrote my first book in 2003, and when I started, I would say 4 out of 5 people were detractors because the industry was still really governed by a sales element, and more people were threatened by me and didn't like my candor. Today, I would say 9 out of 10 people or more are supporters. So the industry has come a long way, and I do believe that the industry has professionalized and become more evidence-based and more transparent. So those are all good things. And I'd like to think that I've played a small role in that transformation, which is ongoing and still has a long way to go. I'll talk about 2 of my books. My first book was called The Professional Financial Advisor. I put out 4 editions. It was about what I just talked about, how the industry is in the process of becoming a profession. And for better or worse, I think we're well on the way. So I'll just leave that at that. My second book is called Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry. And as you can see, I'm not afraid to take the industry on. And the idea here is that there's a lot of evidence that Canadian mutual fund registrants have what are called misguided beliefs. They believe things that are demonstrably untrue. I cited a paper that showed the evidence that that was the case. That paper is now 9 years old. The industry still has not done a gosh darn thing to address the problems that were unequivocally obvious and proven 5 ways till Friday in a paper that showed that advisors believe things that are not true, but the industry has done nothing to disabuse advisors of these false beliefs. My most recent book is the one that's over my shoulder. It's called Bullshift, and that was the one that you were referencing. So it's how the industry, the financial services industry, shifts your attention to make you feel bullish. And the subtitle is How Optimism Bias Threatens Your Finances. So I'll just take one quick moment to talk about optimism bias because we're all biased. We all have dozens of biases. It's part of human nature. But the thing that is optimism bias is a particularly dangerous one because most people think of it as being a good bias. It's usually good to be optimistic about, your life, your career, what have you. A good example of optimism bias is newlyweds. Most people listening to your podcast, Max, will know that these days in North America and in Western Europe and throughout much of the developed world, about 40 to 50% of all marriages end in divorce. That's just it's a well-known fact that's been proven and shown for a couple of generations now throughout the entire developed world. So even though most people know that the odds are approaching 50-50 that their marriage will not work out in the end, if you ask newlyweds on their wedding day, what are the odds that you will divorce? None of them, absolutely none of them will say, well, not me. So that's optimism bias. That's when you're fully aware that 40 to 50% of the people who get married are going to divorce, but nonetheless, that's the statistics for the general population. That doesn't apply to me personally. And in fact, of course, the population is nothing more, nothing less than tens of thousands of people that are making personal decisions to get married every week. So it's an example of the risk that we take that we don't realize we're taking, and we delude ourselves into thinking things are better than they really are. And again, I just to be clear, Max, I'm not a negative person. I'm not a pessimist. I don't think you can go through what I've gone through in my life without being reasonably optimistic. But I do think there is some risk associated with being overly optimistic and not reflective enough about the risks you may be taking and the circumstances that you may be encountering.
Well, it's interesting you bring that up because I find in my talks with people who are authors, creators, public speakers that there seems to be quite a bit of unreasonable optimism. That you may hear that only one a very only a very small number ever ever make money from a book, but that won't stop you from writing one. That sort of thing. And there's also expectation that our results will be better than other people's results. I find that there's a lot of maybe unrealistic optimism in the creative fields, which I
Yep, that's why people start small businesses. That's why people open restaurants. They know that the odds of success are actually fairly long, but they believe that they're special, that they're different, and that they'll find a way to make it work. And some of them do, and you need to have that confidence in yourself in order to take those risks, and that's to be celebrated in general. But if you put your life savings into a restaurant and then the restaurant doesn't gain traction, that's a risk that you took on your own volition. But did you do all your homework, and were you as aware of the risks you were taking before you took them? In some cases, the answer is yes, but in many cases, unfortunately, the answer is no.
so true, so true. So when it comes to investing, do you often find that some of your clients are confused by the differences between what the markets are doing and what the economy feels like it's doing in their households?
Well, I'm confused, so I don't think it should be too surprising that they're a bit confused. What I tell people is that you have to have a process, you have to have a focus and discipline in your decision making. Um, I have a podcast of my own called Make Better Wealth Decisions, and making decisions means, and I talked earlier about bias. We all have biases. We can't fully um, get them under control. The best we can really realistically do is to be reflective and think about, well, am I being biased in my decision making here? And am I being biased, in favor of something that I want as an outcome, either politically or economically? Is my decision to invest in bonds based on the hope that there will be a rate cut in September, and then as a result, my bonds will appreciate because new bonds being cheaper, or what have you? If you are allowing be rational, make decisions that are based on evidence and based on a balance of probabilities. What I would say is that what I tell my clients to do and what I tell people to do on my podcast on Make Better Wealth Decisions is there's this thing called a pre-mortem. So when you watch TV or movies, you'll know that you'll bring in the coroner, and the coroner will do a post-mortem to figure out, when the person died and what the cause of death was and so forth, to try to solve the mystery. A pre-mortem is where it's a thought exercise where you ask yourself, what could have gone wrong? What could possibly go wrong before I make this decision, which could be to get married to someone? or just to open a restaurant, but also to invest in this product or into this asset class, and maybe to invest 10% as opposed to 5% or whatever. What could possibly go right? By all means, think about what could go right. But research shows that people who do a pre-mortem, who actively think about what could go wrong, end up making better decisions because they've been more fulsome in their thought exercise of decision making and being complete and robust and determined to make a decision that is as fact-based as possible and keeping emotion at a minimum.
Okay. All right. So you're continuing to write and you continue to advise people on their financial planning. Is what considering what we're talking about today, is there anything you would advise people to start doing today that would either help them build resolve as you've had to have, or that will help them make better
Very
decisions
well
other than
positioned.
what you just said?
Well, if you've got time to read books, as I say, my book, Stand Up to the Financial Services Industry, and my book, Bullshift, is good. There are other books that are also worth reading. Morgan Housel's book, The Psychology of Money, would be a really useful book to read. And if you're interested in biases in decision making, you might want to read Dan Ariely's book called Predictably Irrational. So these are all books that they're finance books, but they're also psychology books. And they help you to realize that a lot of what you're dealing with is not necessarily intellectual, or at least not entirely intellectual, and that is in many instances more of a psychological challenge than it is an intellectual challenge. And if you can get the psychology of investing down and be able to not be freaked out by headlines on a Monday morning because this and that happened over the weekend or whatever, have an asset mix that makes sense for you. Buy a broadly diversified basket of low cost diversified products and stick to it come hell or high water. Chances are you'll do better than most people who are actively buying and selling and trading and trying to out forecast their neighbor. There's not a lot of research that says you can do that reliably. There's always going to be someone somewhere who does. But just because someone won the lottery on Thursday doesn't mean it's smart to buy lottery tickets. It's just the sort of thing where statistically, every once in a while, oh, here's a good line for you, Max. There's an old saying that even a blind squirrel finds an acorn every now and again. So
Yeah,
so that's the sort of thing that just because someone gets lucky once in a while doesn't mean that they should expect it as part of, and that's optimism bias. By all means be optimistic, but don't be so naive and idealistic as to think that you're somehow special, that good things are going to happen to you just because you're somehow special. You're not.
right. Interesting point on what you're saying about the lottery and how that applies to somebody actually being better than the average. It can happen every so often. I commented to my family over the weekend that one of the mega lotteries was up to 500 and something $1 million, and there were no news stories about it. There were no videos of people standing in long lines. And I told them, I said, I guess we've gotten to the point where $500 million lottery is no longer news. And it's
Yeah,
probably because people have realized that the more it goes up, the less likely they are to win.
yeah, and I think also because people have become desensitized after a while, salacious headlines are not as salacious anymore because there's always some new thing to be motivated about or mad at, and people's attention spans are less than they have been previously.
That's true, as well as the fact that there's probably also people resisting the desire um, to spend available funds.
Yeah, yeah. A lot of people will tell themselves stories. The one of the phrases that I love is that people who rationalize tell rational lies. So a lot of people tell themselves a story about, this is what I'm going to do, and this is what I'm going to do it, and this is why I'm going to do it. And the story is plausible, but it's probably, if you look under the surface, not particularly true. But we have to tell ourselves whatever it is we have to tell ourselves in order to do what we want to do. And it's what our heart wants, not what our head wants most of the time.
Right, which is why it's important to have an advisor like John Goey, somebody who not only says he is passionate about protecting his clients and representing his investors, but actually means it and has taken steps throughout his career to back that up. So, John, I appreciate you coming on What's Your Excuse, and look forward to checking out one of your books.
Great. Thank you so much, Max. It's been a real pleasure.
All right, thank you. So, for those of y'all that have been with us today, I've been speaking with John Goey. He is a multiple award-winning financial planner from Toronto, Canada. He's written 3 books on finance, and you can find him at johndegoey.ca, and I'll put that in the notes so y'all can find him. And of course, I am the blind blogger Maxwell Ivy. You can find me at theblindblogger.net, or where you can hire me as a writer or book me as a speaker. So I do hope you all will check out theblindblogger.net. Appreciate y'all being with us today, and hope you'll join us again next time. Until then, please do take care of yourself out there.
Item chooser met one item end stream button end stream button end the stream and 5 more outro set outro not end stream button end stream button StreamYard Studio.